the link.
Get him in. Aren't you in?
The link.
On Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah.
So you've
I only tell you.
done a card somewhere.
There you go.
Welcome everybody to this meeting of the Scrutiny Board. Online we have Councillor Gavin Lloyd from Coventry. We have Joe Barker from Warwickshire, and I'd like to welcome Cecilia Booth, who is the new chair of ARAC. This is her first attendance at our meeting, and welcome, Cecilia. Thank you for coming.
Hello, thank you.
So apologies for absence.
No apologies received, Chair.
Thank you. Any declarations of interest on the agenda? No declaration of interest. I've got a couple of remarks. At the last meeting, we said that there was a review going on of the arrangements for TDOS at the request of the board, and we expected there to be a result about now, and there isn't. So I'm going to just ask Dan to give us an update on that, if you would, Dan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This has been an evolving situation, it's fair to say. So members may recall that it was the Combined Authority Board that requested a review of transport scrutiny at the start of the municipal year. We employed an independent consultant to undertake that review. Jody Townsend was his name, and he has done his review, spoke to particularly transport scrutiny members, yourself, Chair, other political leaders and the Mayor. He's produced a review, submitted his report, his independent report. And whilst he is making a number of recommendations to strengthen transport scrutiny, there was well, at least one of his considerations was whether the two scrutiny committees should merge into a single scrutiny committee covering all topics. He hasn't recommended that. He still recommends retaining two separate committees, and makes a number of recommendations where he thinks that transport scrutiny in its remit could be strengthened, and they could be even more effective than they are at the moment. However, he has linked those improvements to some wider governance observations about how the Combined Authority operates. And so what has been decided, and the reason for the sort of slight pause in considering his report, is that members may be aware that the LGA is doing a peer review of the Combined Authority starting in a couple of weeks' time, I think running through to January. So discussions between the Chief Executive and the Mayor has concluded that given that the scrutiny review, whilst initially looking specifically at transport scrutiny, has actually evolved into some wider recommendations, it would be appropriate for the peer review to actually consider that Jodie's report at the same time as it's doing a review of the wider governance of the Combined Authority. So rather than sort of a piecemeal approach, actually the governance is looked at in the wider context. So the report has been produced, it's been sent through to our director, and we have a copy, but it's now going to feed into the LGA peer review, which is looking at governance and the Combined Authority in a wider context. And we're expecting that piece of work to conclude, that the LGA will finish their work during January, and then those recommendations that assume arise out of the peer review will be considered by the board. I would guess February, March time, but certainly before the end of the municipal year, so that any changes that the board and the Mayor agree to implement arising out of the peer review will take effect from our municipal year, which starts in June 2026. So work has been done. It's feeding into a bigger piece of work, and obviously we will keep members informed as that evolves over the next few months.
Thank you. And for my own part, I was interviewed and filled in a questionnaire for that early review. And on the 12th of November, I'm being interviewed by the LGA person who's also looking at it. I mean, the view I said was the workload would be too high for a single committee. And whilst some streamlining might be necessary for DDoS, that was outside of my knowledge and experience. But that there needed to be a separate committee focusing on that, particularly given the amount of investment we're going to be making in trams and whatnot, and buses and the changes in franchising. I mean, it's a huge agenda. So I think that was, in general terms, really accepted. I have got one small apology to make. Within the papers, we are going to be looking at recommendations. One of those recommendations was, I don't know if you remember, Si came along and gave a State of the Region report, and within that, it clearly demonstrated that certain ethnic groups were significantly disadvantaged in terms of their participation within the labour market. The opportunity arose at the board for me to actually say that was the discussion that we'd had before we'd actually formalised it, because that was an informal discussion, not a formal discussion. And I thought it was worthwhile saying that. The net result of that is I have a meeting now to discuss that with Helen Dern on the 20th of November to actually try and flesh out that a bit. Councillor Bateman, I don't know if you're free on that date. It's an in-person meeting, but I know you said quite a lot, and I think if this was cross-party, so I just think it would be helpful if this was seen to be not just me, but actually the committee in total. And you did express a lot of interest in this particular topic. We can handle it another time, but if you can't,
remind me of the date.
sorry, it's the 20th of November at 2:30. So that meeting will look at two things. One is that issue, and the second issue is, if you recall, we wanted more information on, can we actually prove that this education and training that we do actually leads to people getting jobs?
Yeah.
And we'll be discussing a bit more about how that might actually be presented. Not actually what the results are, but if they were going to do a piece of work, what that piece of work should actually look like. We did ask for it, and she said, well, can you spend a bit of time just confirming a little more what that might be? Councillor Bateman.
I can't get away with it, Chair. I've got nothing on it. So,
could you do an invite? And I just think the more we can keep this as we are respected actually for being a committee that comes up with unanimous recommendations. And I just kind of like to keep, I think it carries more weight. So if we now move on to the minutes, we've got 3 sets of minutes. At this stage, all we're doing is approving the 3 sets of minutes. So has anybody got any problems with the minutes of the 1st of September? No. I take them as approved, can I? Thank you. The minutes of the 15th of September. I'll take those as approved. And the 15th of October, which was our last proper meeting, I think, wasn't it?
So was the mayoral Q&A?
The mayoral Q&A, that's right, yes. Everybody comfortable with those? I thought that was quite a good session. Yeah. Now, Lindsay, you've come up with a recommendations tracker.
Yes, so recognising that there have been quite a few recommendations made by the committee, and also a few actions that have arisen from the last couple of formal meetings and also the informal briefing sessions. So we have produced a recommendation stroke action tracker just to keep a log of these. So we can go through them if you like, Chair. So 7th of July, there was an ask for the task and finish group to be established. So there is a report on today's agenda. on the findings of that task and finish group. So that's been picked up. Local authority breakdown, I'll hand over to Louise for this one.
Morning, everyone. There's been various iterations of a piece of work that breaks down the funding for the West Midlands region, and we'll be providing a further update at the training session on Monday, 17th of November. Yeah. So that to brief members on how the totality of funding is allocated across the region. Thank you.
So that will be for all programmes as best as you can judge it. Because some of this stuff is not easy to allocate, but because I know when we've been out talking to scrutiny committees, within that presentation, there are some very small numbers said about what is spent in local authorities, and I think it's caused more confusion than it's helped. But that was about, I mean, we do spend 1.2 billion, or we're going to, and to have some idea of where that money is spent. And I know Councillor Kettle is particularly interested in this one, would be very helpful. So we will have that before the meeting with the mayor.
Yes, definitely.
Not before Wednesday, because we've got our scrutiny.
No, unfortunately not. But we will be saying we are going to do, this piece of work will be available. Thank you for that.
Education budget outcomes, Chair, you picked up on this earlier and you have a meeting with Helene. There's also a report due to come to this committee in January. Economic growth and future transport plans. So comments from this committee were fed back to the chair of TDOS, Councillor Tim Huxtable. During September, that committee did have a presentation on the spatial development strategy, and discussions were held with regards to how transport fits in to the wider piece. Okay, there's a couple of actions that will be followed up over the next couple of weeks with regards to the job rotation model and also the National Environment Update. So I will follow those up and get updates to members. Race Equality Task Force. Again, Chair, picking up on your comments earlier, that will be picked up in your meeting with Helene Dunn. Housing rate variations. Again, that's something that will be followed up and shared with members. Going over onto page 19. Again, I will follow up these and forward updates to members over the next couple of weeks.
Thank you. We're making recommendations. We've now got to have a tracker, which is good. Affordable Homes program. We had a meeting. We made some recommendations. Rob, you're going to just take us through this, and on some of it, I think I know that Councillor Scott wanted to talk about one of the recommendations, and in particular. So if you could just take us through the background, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. So the paper sets out a kind of update position, really, following the discussion at the Scrutiny Committee on the 7th of July, where we talked about the various means and elements of affordable homes and social homes delivery in the region, and Combined Authority and its partners' ability to influence and bring forward more affordable homes.
So I think you might speak a bit now.
Oh, apologies, Chair. Apologies, Councillor. I'll try and speak up. Sorry, my throat's a bit croaky this morning. So, as I said, this is an update report on the recommendations following the task and finish group or working group that was set up following the committee meeting in July. The working group met on the 12th of September, and we went through in some detail around the various elements of urban social homes input and influence that the Combined Authority and its partners can have. In terms of the specifics on that, one of the major areas of focus for us as a region at the moment is the next social and affordable homes programme. So this is the national government programme for social and affordable homes that will commence next April 2026. And it's a £39 billion programme that was announced by government earlier this year. This follows on from the existing programme, which completes next April. There's been quite a lot of development over the last 2 years around how combined authorities, specifically in Manchester, Greater Manchester and here in the West Midlands, will be able to inform and influence that programme. And we have now recently submitted our pro forma to government to set out our priorities for the region for that programme and the prospectus that is due to be launched. We think this month, although we're still waiting for a confirmed date from government when that will be. Originally it was autumn 2025, that was the best we had. Then we were told end of October, and then we were being told sometime in November. So as soon as we do know a confirmed date, we'll let you know, Chair and members. But in reflection of the meeting of the Task and Finish group, we focused on some of the main areas of interest, both for members and for the wider region, in terms of how we're trying to influence the programme, specifically around more social rent homes in the next programme. So a focus on that tenure, a focus on supporting the specialist accommodation and some potential opportunities for us to do more in that space for the region. What we're liking or looking to do around larger family housing. So at the moment there is quite a significant demand for larger family homes, particularly in this part of the region, and particularly around social rent for that type of home. So how we can try to secure more of that in future. And then in particular we had a pretty detailed conversation around how we'd like to see more estate regeneration. Now this is an area of some complexity in terms of how we can use our existing funds at the Combined Authority and hopefully bring forward more affordable homes programme funds into that. And there are significant areas of need, as members will be aware, throughout the region for estate regeneration. My colleague Sal has joined us today, who has worked on a recent example of where we have managed to gain investment approval for our funding to join Housing and funding for a particular estate regeneration scheme in the region. So I will introduce Sal to talk through some of that in detail, Chair, if that's okay with you. But just to conclude, the recommendations of the working group are included in the paper. We're taking those forward in terms of the areas that we've set out as a focus for the prospectus for the next programme. And we are hoping to both know when the launch date of that is and confirmed content for the West Midlands element of that prospectus ASAP. So the key thing I just wanted to say from our perspective, working on this as a combined authority, it's really great to get the upfront overview and scrutiny committee on this to be able to form and shape those recommendations and form and shape our priorities for the region rather than it being a retrospective review of that. So thank you to the committee and the working group for all of you.
Thank you, Paul, and good morning, everyone. So in September, Citizen Housing Group were successful in securing combined authority funding of circa 6.6 million for phase 1 of Swan End, which will deliver 257 units, 100% of which will be affordable housing, some commercial space in addition to associated works to improve the infrastructure in the area. Phase 1 forms part of a wider master plan for the regeneration of the Swan End estate, which will look to demolish 450 units in total and replace them with around 750 new energy efficient homes. This will be done across 3 phases over the next 10 years. So just to provide you with a bit of context behind the Swan End estate, it's a former stock transfer from Coventry Council, and it's considered to be one of the most deprived areas nationally, and also recognised to be a local and a regional priority to Coventry City Council. The blocks themselves were built in the 1960s, which have since been deemed to be structurally compromised and therefore uninhabitable. So effectively, they're unsafe homes to live in and they needed to be demolished. So while schemes like this have the potential to deliver huge social and economic benefits, they're not easy schemes to bring forward. Regeneration sites in particular, they not only have to deal with some of the constraints that other developers have to deal with, for example, cost inflation and changes to building regulations, but in addition to that, they have additional considerations around buybacks, decanting costs, demolition costs, and of course those costs. So those have a time and cost implication of their programme. When the combined authority is making assessments, not only do we assess based on funding criteria compliance, but we also assess based on confidence around deliverability. So the more a scheme has been worked up and de-risked, the greater assurances the combined authority has around deliverability. And that's one of the key challenges when we have these conversations with developers. Developers will want to take, but they have to take on the risk of time, resource, and money to work up a scheme, but may not necessarily want to do that if they haven't got assurances from ourselves around funding at the end of it. What's worked particularly well on this project is our close collaborative working with Homes England. And I think that's given citizens particularly the confidence to continue to progress works and significantly de-risk the site, which has of course given us assurances around deliverability of the site itself. So since our conversation with the citizen in the last few years, they've agreed buybacks and gained possession, vacant possession for phase one. They've commenced with demolition, they've submitted planning, secured Homes England funding and secured contractor. So they're intending to be on site, they're currently on site solely with demolition at the moment, and they're intending to start with the actual construction of the housing units towards the end of next year.
Chair, could I just add up to that, and a huge thanks to Sal and the team for getting this project approved. Where we've struggled in the past and where we're pushing government for ability to do more of these schemes is basically we're measured on net additional new homes. So if for example 200 homes are demolished and 250 are built, we would only be able to, if you like, claim the additional 50, which makes the calculations very difficult from a value for money basis, just on a pure financial basis. With these homes at Spun End being more abundant, not effectively not fit for habitation, they were therefore not counted in that net figure, which helps us on that one particular scheme, but doesn't necessarily help us on lots of other opportunities where we know this is needed, but we haven't got to that stage in the kind of not fit for purpose stage of those existing homes. So one of the things we're very keen to push for in the region in the next programme is the ability to not just claim those additional homes, but to be able to do all of the replacement homes within the programme as well. So this is a great example, and it's been a long gestation period for several years with working with Citizen and Homes England on how we've been able to bring the funds together, but hopefully it will be a step in the direction of more progress in the future.
Thank you. I've got two people indicated to support, Councillor Waters, then Councillor McKee, and then Councillor Kettle, and then Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, was it Swanside? Where is Swanside? And this development, is it social and buy-to-let and for sale, or is it one category and not all three? Thank you.
It's Spun End, which is based in Coventry City Council, and it's 100% affordable housing, 205 will be social rent, so significantly social rent units being delivered, and the other proportion will be 52 rent.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Councillor McKee.
Thanks very much, Chair. I've got three questions. Do you want me to just throw them all out there?
One at a time.
One at a time, okay. The first one was just on this regeneration project. I'm just wondering, are there people still resident in it and whilst you're organising? So I know that Druids Heath at Birmingham City Council are organising. That's a I don't know about this one, but I'm guessing it's a similar scenario. Dwellings coming to their end, blocks coming to the end of their natural life. Obviously, they need to be regenerated and moved on. But obviously, the residents who live there feel very angry about this. You know, they're sort of storming into meetings and arguing with planners and things like that. And they feel that their community is being ripped out because obviously, whilst overall the development will turn some lovely houses, these so whatever the turnaround, say it's a 10 year, whatever it is, the build, these people will be moved away from where they're living now, their families and friends located somewhere else. If they're lucky, they may get back. They're not really, don't really believe that they're going to get moved back. And it's sort of upending sort of the way they live their life currently, really. So they're not very supportive. So I'm just wondering, is that different in Coventry, or is the same things, or is it just there's no one living there anyway because everyone's been moved out because their houses aren't fit for purpose?
Okay, I'll answer as best I can, Councillor. So my understanding of Spon in certainly phase one is that the homes are not occupied and therefore they are replacement of the homes that are empty. And my understanding and conversations with citizens and Coventry City Council over the years, there's been a lot of community engagement and a lot of consultation on the proposals for the further phases as well. From memory, although I haven't got this written down, but I can double check and come back to the councils as well. There has been commitments for all tenants who want to remain in that area in the new homes to be homes in the new homes. So it's not a case of people being moved out for that scheme. So I'll come back with some further detail on that just to clarify that, but that's my understanding of the process. And in terms of the kind of wider impact on the area and the people who live in that area currently, as I say, I know that has been a considerable amount of community consultation engagement. It's gone through the planning process, so there's been all of the kind of statutory, but also the additional works to work with the community on what they want to see in that area. So we'll come back to the committee with more information on that, if that's helpful, Chair.
Thank you. Second question.
Yeah, I mean, may not be totally relevant, but what I'm finding more and more of, just saying there's a shortage of family homes. What I'm finding of where in the past family homes has been converted to HMOs or exempt accommodation or something like that. I've got a new one that's coming up at the moment where being a lot of times homes that you would say look completely unsuitable being converted into children's homes, because again it's another opportunity where to make some money out of. And you know, if the children were the first priority, you know, at least you could say something, but they're not, are they? You know, it's just because basically it's a family home. Sometimes it's a developer who may have developed a house or something, looking to sell it, can't get the money that they want for it, so therefore I'll go down the route of a children's home, so at least it's earning for me. Or other times it's someone who's just bought it and speculatively looking to do it, and all I see is more and more pressure on family homes being converted into ruining the character of a street in an area, and no one really seems to win out from it, because as I say, if these children's homes or exempt accommodation, the idea behind that is a really good idea, but you know, the idea of support of a loaf of bread being dropped off once a week is not what was meant. And so just wondering, you know, is there some security built into here that if we're going to build some of these family homes that they will remain so, you know?
In terms of our current programmes and how that works, Chair, we ensure that all of our development agreements and contractual agreements with developers are based on the long-term provision of those homes as they're set out to be, so that we do have those guarantees in place. I think longer term, or perhaps more examples of where, you know, more older types of properties are being converted like this, and there is a considerable problem in various parts of the region. We don't necessarily have any powers or ability to affect that at the moment, but what we have been very keen to do is work with local authorities where potentially we can look at whether the next affordable homes programme could be used to buy local property, bring them back into that type of use. So at the moment we don't have that ability to do that, but we are advocating for that, because I think it is a significant issue, particularly around older build, larger homes being converted into lots of smaller exempt accommodation or whatever it might be. You lose the ability to then use those homes for their original purpose, which is the family home, which is what we need more of. So it is noted as an issue, but it's difficult at the moment for us to do, excuse me, do a huge amount with it at the moment.
Can I just double check what I think I heard you say, which is the combined authority will not fund the conversion of existing houses into HMOs? That is a no-no, is it?
Certainly, we've never done that, certainly as far as I'm aware, Chair, and we don't have any intent to do so. All of our investment opportunities come through investment board, and I'm pretty sure that would be, even if we were looking to do it, it wouldn't be approved.
Yeah, I mean, green flashing light, but thank you. For what it's worth, anything that we could do to bring what were family homes back to family homes, I'd certainly be very supportive of. And the final one is a bit of an ephemeral question, really, but as I certainly used to be, our definition of affordable homes, I think, is slightly different from some councils' definition of affordable homes. So when we're building these, is this to our definition or to, I don't know what Coventry's definition of affordable homes is, but ours, I think, is the combined authority's definition of affordable homes is something that sounds affordable to me. The national definition, I think, is slightly different and is seems to be a lot more harder to achieve, if I've got that correct.
Thank you, Councillor, and this has been, and Councillor Waters will know we've had this conversation many times over the years. We've got in the appendix to the report today the national tenure type and definitions of the various different types of affordable homes in the national programme. Effectively, that's the kind of national guidance that all registered providers, councils, housing associations, developers have to follow. What we have looked to do in the past is link that more to local income levels, etc. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but it is something that we have tried to do in the region. Affordability is a perennial question of what is actually genuinely affordable. The focus on social rent as the tenure for the next programme, I think, is a really positive step in that, because it is effectively the most affordable type of tenure that there is out there. Government have committed to at least 60% of the next programme being for social rent. And we've also looked at that and said that pretty much matches what local authorities and others have told us is the need in this region as well. I think as a national guide, that is the best we can look to, is that social rent tenure. But I think there's always a question of not just the affordability of the rent or the mortgage if it's a mortgage property, it's also the affordability of being able to live in those homes and run those homes, and that's something else we're looking at with colleagues both in retrofit energy teams and things around digital tools as well, to make the homes more affordable and more long-term value for money for the people who live there. So whilst it's a complex and quite often confusing picture about what is affordable, both the national parameters and what we're trying to do at region, I think, is a good attempt to make that clearer. And we are trying to do everything we can, both with our funds, but also our kind of wider working with make that genuinely affordable approach for.
Again, just to double check, we will fund as a combined authority social rent, so-called affordable rent, i.e. at least 20% below the market rate, shared ownership, but not first homes. Discounted homes to buy is what I mean. We don't do the latter. I know we don't, but do we do? Do we fund shared ownership?
So just for clarity, Chair, because I think this is a really important part for us to just be really clear about, the combined authority will fund the development of schemes that will include all of those types of tenure. It's the Affordable Homes Programme from Homes England, which basically converts the grant into whether it's social rent or shared ownership. So we would support any of those types of schemes coming forward as long as it's got planning approval and it's what is needed in the area. The Homes England funding as it currently is would fund the actual shared ownership or the social rent. So we would look to bring the land forward in whatever way that's needed, and then the Affordable Homes Programme funding would be added into that to bring those tenures forward. But we've got no veto over any of those types of tenure. It's very much based on what the planning authority wants to see there and what can be supported.
Thank you for that. Move on to Councillor Kettle.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When you say you demolish the property that's going to replace, And it will be starting next year. When next year? What delays are going to be on the starting of the job, and when will it start?
So they're currently on site with demolition at the moment. I don't have the actual dates to hand at the moment, unfortunately. But
Are we talking months or weeks?
no, I believe demolition will complete in November, and they will then start gearing up to start with the actual construction. It's hoped late next year.
Late next year. So we're going to wait 12 months. The site's sitting idle for 12 months.
They won't be fitting out. They've had to work up the scheme in terms of securing all of the funding in place and also approving the contractor and finalising the design. So once that's complete, they'll still be in a position to be able to gear up to actually start on site. I can get the actual dates for you in if that's what's required.
It seems a terrible waste that a place is knocked down and you're standing about looking at it for 12 months while things aren't in place. You know, these days when builders turn in, they're pretty useful and they don't often make an impact on a site when they've got a chance. This concept of having to wait 12 months seems absurd to me.
I don't have the exact dates to hand at the moment, but I can get those dates for you and get a more defined timeline as to when demolition will complete and then start on site with the actual construction of the units.
I must admit, my experience of greenfield development is it can take you at least a year between planning approval and start on site. I mean, this is because they won't do detailed design until such time as they know it's actually worth spending that money. And then you've got to go out, get quotes. So there's a long process that house builders go through that they're not going to do until they know they have certainty that they can actually build. And in this case, it's not only planning permission certainty, it's also funding certainty. Because they're not only getting money from us, they're getting it from Homes England and wherever else it is they're getting it from. So I think this is normal, Councillor Kettle.
But Mr. Chairman, if nearly 4 billion a year from 6-7 next year goes on for the next 10 years, we've got to get our act together to act quicker than we are doing, surely. This has got to be looked at. The delay here is enormous. And when 4 billion comes into the equation in the CA area, we've got to speed things up, surely. The money, if the project is viable, we should have a performer where we're ready to start far quicker and get going. This seems an absurdity that we have 39 billion on the way into the area, and yet from day one we've got to wait 12 months before we kick off. It seems ridiculous.
Just a bit of detail on that, Chair. It's worth just saying that whilst demolition of the existing homes will be complete, there is then also site clearance and various other things that will need to happen. So it's not just knock them down and build them again. They will need to clear the site, they will need to do ground investigations, etc., etc. So it will take some time. We'll clarify the specific programme dates, but basically this is the work of the housing association and their subcontractors and developers to get those schemes built. It's working to their timelines in terms of obviously their supply chain and everything else.
Thank you, Councillor Scott.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you both. So I just want to come on the recommendation around minimum space standards and HMOs. I'd say Councillor Mackey's already mentioned around, you know, some of the challenges that we face across the region around once something becomes an HMO, that's it. It's not coming back as a family home. And so I wonder, you know, what is the work that we can do to make sure there is also affordable accommodation for single people through studios, things like that, so we can start to prevent more properties go, you know, turn into HMOs and things like that. And sort of, is there any best practice in other areas where this type of approach has already happened that we can learn from and try to have an intervention?
Thank you, Councillor Scott. So the specific example we talked about in the working group was around a proposal that we are currently talking to St Basil's, who you might be aware of as a homelessness charity, do a lot of work with, and they're just opened a building just next door actually, where they've got accommodation for young people going into their first jobs potentially, and making sure that those homes are genuinely affordable for that type of cohort of people. One of the questions that was raised about that was the national space standards, and I think we would all agree that the space standards in terms of making sure people have got enough room in the homes they need are right and proper. But some of the types of properties St Basil's have been looking at that would be really appropriate for that type of accommodation, because you're talking about small studio flats that young people would need, with communal living areas, communal kitchens, etc. They wouldn't be able to convert those buildings because they are too small in terms of individual rooms for the young people. So in specific circumstances where we'd be working with a really trusted partner and a really trusted organisation such as St Basil's, which is a well-regarded charity, etc., could there be some flexibility and leeway to look at things in a slightly different way? And that's a question that St Basil's have posed to us, and we've talked to the working group around, and we're in open dialogue with Homes England about, is that something we could potentially look at in future, but certainly not as an attempt to water down, space standards for more, for want of a better word, standard accommodation that would be, inappropriate for that type of thing. So it's more about flexibility to use an opportunity differently in future, rather than kind of trying to make it open season for all kinds of, reductions of space standards and stuff. Going back to the point about homes of multiple occupation and whether they can be rebought back into use as family homes, I think, as you said, it's something we really recognise as an issue, and talked a lot to local authorities about particular parts of their local authority areas where this is an issue and what can be done. The funding restrictions we have at the moment really prohibit us being able to directly do something on that, but it is something we'd really like to be able to do more. And I think if we could, continually advocate for that through this committee as well, I think that would be really helpful.
Just thanks for that. Just to quickly come back around, are you aware of any other areas where they've made those sort of or had that flexibility around the space requirements today?
I'm not currently aware of any, no, but what we have done is we've kind of reached out through St Basil's and others to say, do you know of other organisations who are also thinking about this? So particular organisations in central London who do a similar kind of role to St Basil's in that part of the country. Can we kind of get a bit of a groundswell? I'm not aware of any actual examples of that yet, but I do know there is support, and I'll pick up and see if there is any further information on there, if and where that is going to go.
Sorry, yeah, I just make one short comment. I'm just curious about as well, what sort of properties and buildings we're sort of talking about here. Are we talking about sort of ex-commercial? Are we talking about larger homes or houses? And so just so I can understand what sort of properties and we're looking these sort of things like.
So in terms of being able to bring them into use as family homes?
No, in terms of like what St Basil's are looking at, for example, in terms of those sort of developments. So
effectively, where this has been made to work in the past by St Basil's, so there's the building side remit, is that way, I think.
That way,
sorry, which was formerly a Midland Heart accommodation. So it's effectively a conversion of what used to be supported accommodation. The scheme in Sandwell was formerly an NHS nursing accommodation, which they've converted. So they're open to a range of different things. Commercial property can be converted, but there are difficulties in that, and there's a lot of different things around light availability, space availability, etc. So it's not straightforward. But I think we're quite open to, if there's a genuinely feasible scheme, let's see how we can best support it. So nothing's off the table as such, but some things that probably easy in the eyes, so to speak.
Thank you.
Just to double check two things. One is this could be a new build on a brownfield site. i.e. purpose-built accommodation. Yes, you're nodding, so that's fine. And the second thing is the planning authority within the 7 authorities actually got the final say. You're just providing the money, or we are just providing the money.
Yes, absolutely. We have no, we have no direct involvement in the planning decisions or, but so we would not seek to support anything that wasn't supported by the local.
Yeah. I think that's very important. Councillor Quinnan.
Thank you, Chair. My question follows nicely from Councillor Scott, but I think because I had it in mind that I should say it anyway so that it can be on record. So how will you ensure that the Affordable Homes Programme reflects the diverse housing needs of both constituent and non-constituent authorities? Now, the diverse housing needs, specifically the elderly, people with disabilities, single people, and those young people who come from children's homes. And also, where will homes for veterans sit in this as a priority? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So in terms of the I suppose the reflection of local need, what we've been very keen to do is work with each local authority in the combined authority area on what are their current needs and their future projected needs in terms of different types of homes and different cohorts. So you mentioned non-constituent authorities, a number of non-constituent authorities raised a question around sort of rural housing and affordability in rural areas being particularly different to, some of the major cities or towns in the area, and how the different needs are reflected there in terms of the individual kind of cohorts of people that you mentioned. So, for example, the elderly or different types of different demographics. Again, I think it comes back to how well we can influence through the planning system what is approved and what comes through and what schemes are developed and what focus they have. Particular providers are, some housing associations and other providers have a particular focus, not necessarily geographically, but on particular types of homes. So some of those might be elderly accommodation, some of them might be for the younger cohort, as I mentioned, St Basil. So how do we best support those organisations to apply for the grant funding and make sure that they get those schemes coming forward? All of our funded applications and all of our programmes go through an equality impact assessment. So we do all of that work up front around making sure that we reflect the various needs of our communities in the decisions that get made. So I think there's a combination of things that we can do whilst we are setting out what the priorities are for this region in terms of the delivery. The national programme, we are told, is going to be very kind of open about what types of accommodation it wants to support, other than it being a focus on social rent. So I think it's more of a regional influencing and then a local authority decision-making abilities through the planning process to make sure that we do support those homes. I don't think there'll be any national targets, for example, for elderly accommodation or different demographics to be supported. I think it's very much down to us as a region to push for that, and for the local planning process to be a key part in making sure that we get the types of demand met in the region.
Councillor Lloyd.
Cheers, Chair. Firstly, apologies for not being present this morning. Emergency at home and childcare, unfortunately. And just very quickly, if I may, Chair, just a very quick comment before I ask my question, with your permission.
Of course, I was rather hoping you might come back on the Coventry scheme.
But funnily enough, that's exactly why I wish to make a comment, because not only is it obviously Coventry, but by double pure fluke, whether there's a declaration here, there's no interest, so there's no, but in planning terms, I would be putting a declaration of contact down. Because first and foremost, I happen to represent the ward that Spon End falls in. And the second point to it is I was also on the planning committee that made the decision 2 weeks Thursday back. So I'm reliving this meeting 3-4 times a week at present, but there we go. And I think in layman's terms, Citizen, Cov Council have done all of the works needed. The housing mix, it's not what Coventry would want, but it's a darn sight better than what was already present. It's as simple as that, that there are improvements, big improvements, but not to the level that we'd all hope we could have ticked that box to, but it is what it is. And one of the biggest things that actually got me is the Spon End estate and everything that they've done, Citizen in particular, and whether the combined authority have had input on this, I'm not sure. If they have, bravo to whoever it is. But this is one of the biggest social value plans and projects that I've ever seen come forward. Practically everything is going to be local, and it was it was actually really refreshing to see come through. And just to answer a couple of the comments and questions, all tenants have been offered a remove back in, and I've got that in black and white myself because it's one of my biggest pieces of casework from that area over the last year. And there's a gain on parking, there's a gain on units, there's a gain on biodiversity, and you name it, it ticks the box. It is just improvement, 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 improvement the whole way through. Half of the site has already been demolished, and some of it hasn't been. But when we get to that bit, obviously, Citizen, developers, etc., we'll put our heads together and start getting in as soon as possible. So just to very quickly answer Mr. Kettle on it. Part of the reason that the flats have had to be demolished now is because they were built so quickly, many moons ago. Corners were probably half cut. If it takes 12 months, it takes 12 months. If it takes 2 years, it takes 2 years. It needs to be done safely. That's the demolishing all the way through. It is a huge brownfield site with a bit of green through the middle and a river. Kudos to what they've managed. And Jamie's point just around the HMO schemes, I know locally in Coventry, part of the conditions at the end of the planning application when it came through were that particular. They were solid in there from a Coventry standstead, but from a combined authority perspective, it might be something worth making sure we do cover across all angles going forward. And Councillor Quinnin, the only bit that wasn't answered for yourself was about the armed forces, and everybody in Coventry signed up for the Armed Forces Covenant, so they do get preferential treatment as well. And then leading on to the sort of the question, and it's a tongue-in-cheek one, and I apologise to the officers reservedly straight away. After everything that I've just said and being fully involved in it, I didn't have a clue that West Midlands Combined Authority were involved. So I am sort of scratching my head a bit of, if we were involved, what have we done to influence all of those positives? And the other side is, I know we were involved, obviously, as a combined authority, but why does nobody know that? Why aren't we singing about some of those successes, etc., and sort of making sure that people are aware of what good works have been done? Cheers, Chair.
Great question.
I'll comment on some of that, and then Sam might want to answer some of the more recent points. So just in terms of our involvement, what we're very keen not to do is make it sound like we've done all of this and made it all happen at the Combined Authority, because I think it's very clear this has been a real focus of effort from a wide range of partners. So Citizen, Coventry City Council, Homes England, ourselves, all working together, all trying to find a solution to something that's been frankly talked about for as long as I can remember. I haven't been here since 2018. We've been talking to government about the funding mix since around 2020, as long as I can remember, going to the first kind of presentation to communities and local government department, as it was then, with a proposal for can we do more around estate regeneration. So we've been involved for a long time. The key bit for us to be able to work out is how can we use our funds in conjunction with the Affordable Homes Programme funds from Homes England. That has taken some time. It's Sal's hard work and the team in terms of getting that approved. There has been a bit of press coverage and announcements made and visits from the mayor, etc. But I think it's really important for us to not claim credit for everything, but we have put some funding into this, and I totally appreciate the councillors' point that if people don't know the Combined Authority have been involved, then that's a missed opportunity for us to be able to show what we're doing. So take that point on board, but also reiterate the point that it's been very much a partnership effort, and council officers and citizen staff have been relentless in trying to get this process agreed as well. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about.
Thank you, Bob. We do have local authority engagement meetings, but we do provide regular updates with the local authorities and provide them with updates of schemes that we're looking at the moment. So it very much depends on which officers have been speaking to us on behalf of the Coventry City Council. And Bob just raised a really valid point around collaborative working. Currently, we're negotiating the funding agreement. So once that's finalised, there will be more comms out to kind of indicate that we have been supporting the scheme in conjunction with also Homes England and the local authority as well.
Councillor Lloyd, any further comment?
Thank you, Chair. Just one very quick one. So with everything that in mind, going forward, perhaps a recommendation that combined authority actually consult direct with local ward councillors, because everything that I've had is via officers, and I've never had that opportunity myself as a councillor representing an area to say to the combined authority, actually, what you guys are doing, have a look at this. Or the second side to it is, actually, we do want a bit more publicity on this because it is a good story. And so possible recommendation there, Chair, but other than that, everything else is solid. Thanks.
Take that on board, Chair, absolutely. And just to say, I think Sal's point around the funding agreement being in place and then there being more comms is a key part of this as well. So whilst we communicate that something has been approved through investment board, yeah, contractual bit is the point where we can kind of put the bang the so to speak. So there is a bit of a stage.
I think there was a discussion, I can't remember, where we said when we have these schemes, when they start JCBs going and there's a sign outside the site, it ought to say supported by the West Midlands Combined Authority.
Yeah.
If we're putting large amounts of cash in, that's what the EU used to do all the time. And the Welsh Development Agency I've seen do that as well. So I can't see why we couldn't do that. And it gives a kind of local presence, because most of our residents, they've never even heard of the combined authority. They've heard of the mayor, but they don't understand that there's over £1 billion of money being spent around. You know, if you've got some hoardings up, I think if we could do that, but it needs to form part of an overall publicity strategy agreed by the authority. Councillor Scott.
No, just very quickly, Chair. As well as I appreciate Councillor Lloyd's point around engaging with wards members. I wonder whether this is an ask that we could have a member engagement team at the combined authority around some of the forward planning around big projects in the region, and seeing what the involvement should be of members rather than simply putting it on the officers sort of here. You know, we have got our team at the CA that is, to my understanding, does do that. So could that be an ask?
Yeah. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Now, there's one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and the Chair and I was talking about it just before the meeting, and that's care leavers. Now, I'll quickly give you a little example. Our care leavers in Warsaw put on a lovely little workshop for us to take part in and interact with them. And the last half of the actual session, we actually went off subject, and me and my colleague actually dealt with the issues they got regarding the properties, because I know this don't really combined authority can do anything about this part of it, but it's a case of the local housing association isn't really looking at where they're putting the care leavers. And it's a case of the care leavers around. I mean, this one, I asked him if I actually said I was going to mention it here, and he said I could. He's been put in a place, he's got himself a job, doing really well, but then above him, there's someone who's dealing drugs and keeping him up all night and so forth. And what could be done with being done is certain blocks of flats, 1-bedroom flats, which are actually allocated for such a care leavers, because I mean, such as Warsaw, we really nurtured our care leavers and they really enthralled to get on with life and in what's the name. But at the moment, there is no provision for them in Warsaw. They just plugged here and plugged there and so forth. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor. I'd just say, as you say, that's very much around local authority nominations and various other parts of the kind of letting process. So it's not something the combined authority is directly involved in, but obviously we'd support and seek to support what the local authorities looking to achieve in those types of proposals if they come forward for our funding. It's not our funding criteria, but it would certainly go into the additional implications of how we'd be helping to support that type of provisions.
Thank you. I think we're called upon to approve the recommendations that are on page 21. The first of those is to agree the core principles underlying the West Midlands submission for social and affordable homes programme prospectus, which basically Rob has explained. Are members comfortable with that? Yes. Then we've got the 4 specific recommendations that the programme should maximise the potential of small, underused urban and rural sites. And when we talk about these, we're talking brownfield sites reclamation. So this isn't about building on greenfields. This is about the reclamation. And we're not just interested in big sites, we're also interested in small sites. Prioritise the renewal of outdated social housing, which Rob has given a good explanation of, and the Spon scheme. Look at that potential innovative solutions regarding the relaxing the minimum space standards for trusted organisations. And I think St Basil's was the example given, but we are talking a very small number of organisations to meet a very specific need. Care leavers might be another example of where you can get a proper front door, which is important. And any work that we do on regeneration schemes should look at the broader social and environmental benefits for the land use, because derelict sites are a blight on the local community. And if there are benefits in getting these sites out of dereliction and into use, it's not only good for the people who sit in the houses, it's good for everybody who sits around them as well. And that, I think, was we wanted that within the criteria, which I suspect there are in. That were our recommendations. Are people comfortable on those 4 items? Councillor Bateman.
Just picking up the issue that we've just talked about recognition of the WMCA. It does strike me as you go around doing each of the scrutiny committees, it's a real opportunity, isn't it, to place in front of the scrutiny committees that you're visiting as us a paragraph or a paragraph which states what we're doing in the wards and the like. That way you alert the local authority whilst we're going about our business in the normal way that we do, and I think that's real opportunity.
So if there are schemes that are coming through, I'm off to Dudley on Wednesday. If there are schemes at Dudley, it was worth us highlighting them. That's the kind of thing you're talking about, is it?
Yes, Chair. I mean, I think there can't be a more simpler approach. If we're talking about how we're interacting with scrutiny boards who are delivering all the work within their own local authorities, I don't think there's an easier way to say that these are the schemes that are being enacted within the West Midlands Combined Authority, and it's simple, it's easy, it draws attention, but it isn't exactly standing on a rampart blowing bugles, and it gives the opportunity for the scrutiny board in the Home Authority to ask the question, and I think that ought to be just as part of the format. I believe the work that you do and the scrutiny board's doing in Wolverhampton when we meet, we could go on and on for ages. In fact, I thought we were at the last meeting. But a paragraph in the paperwork would be really, really helpful, and it would spark the interest from members in the Home Authority that may be able to be picked up and carried through the normal processes as we do.
And the presentation and what we did, I think so. You're right, aren't you?
Mm.
So councillor McKee and then councillor Archer.
Just a quick one on that, and I know it's difficult. Obviously, we've got to work harmoniously with other councils, but I mean, I know sometimes if I'm sat in cabinet and they'll say, Birmingham will be going, great, we've got this fabulous thing coming up and it's great, and we're chucking in all this cash. And then I'll just say, hold on, I was in a combined authority meeting the other week, and aren't they ponying up so many millions and all this other stuff? Oh yes, well of course they are doing that, but this is still our project and we're very proud of it, and aren't we very good at delivering it? And so I know you can't really sort of bang the desk, but you know, there must be a middle ground where, you know, you can get the sort of the recognition you deserve, I think, as an organisation, as I'd probably say.
Thank you for that. Councillor Archer.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Just to totally agree with Councillor Bateman and the last comments. As you mentioned, you're coming to Dudley on Wednesday, and I'm chairing that meeting, as it happens, about Scrutiny Committee, and I can guarantee that the questions are going to be, okay, you're talking about all this money that you're spending, what you're actually doing here locally, what you're doing in Dudley, and what's the impact in every area.
So you've got a challenge. Is Ed coming on? Who's coming from the combined authority this time?
I'll just need to confirm.
Yeah, just make sure they have some examples. I think that would be helpful.
If it's helpful, Chair, we do currently provide a report to Investment Board which sets out by each local authority what schemes have previously been approved, and there is a list in there of schemes that are working through the system but not yet there. So we can, we might be able to turn this around by Wednesday, but in future we should be able to provide that with you on a regular basis for these meetings, for the authorities, if that's helpful.
I think this is a broader issue. That's great for housing, but I think we've got adult education. I mean, one of the things I know that we've done in Dudley, and I will be mentioning, is the retrofit college that is being set up as part of Dudley College. So there are other things that the combined authority does in various areas. And I think if we could just get a short list of those, somebody must be able to go, oh, we're off to Dudley. What have we done in Dudley? And I mean, it doesn't have to be a comprehensive list. You're just after some examples that make it real for your area, aren't you? Yeah, absolutely, we can do that. Thank you. Useful comments. That's an additional recommendation, but we're happy on the housing recommendations, yes? Agreed. Thank you very much. Youth Trailblazer Scheme. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So first of all, thank you for the opportunity to present an update regarding the Youth Trailblazer. So in terms of the Youth Trailblazer, obviously it came through the Get Britain Working white paper that came out last November. And in December last year, we were awarded as one of the 8 combined authorities Youth Trailblazer status. And what that meant is that we've been afforded the opportunity to allocate 5 million to support 18 to 21-year-olds over the course of this financial year. The paper itself also alludes to that we now have an option to extend that for a further year to build on some of the things that we've achieved and some of the learning that's been created as well. The other thing I probably should note in relation to this paper is, one, it kind of sets out, I suppose, what our ambition was in terms of what our approach was in terms of working with our local authorities, but it's very much in terms of us setting the scene with hopefully a view to us coming back at a later stage to really start talking around actually what's the difference that this made, how did it shift the dial in relation to the young people that we've been working with as part of this approach. So when we talk about the Youth Trailblazer, one of the important things for me to reference before I kind of get into the detail of some of the elements that we're looking to pursue within the paper is that it doesn't sit in isolation. So as part of the Get Britain Work white paper and as part of our West Midland Works launch that we had last week, it's kind of setting up that there is an ecosystem of activity and support for our residents, and particularly for those 18 to 21-year-olds as well. And often it's referred to through government as being the youth guarantee. So when we talk about what we want to do with the Trailblazer, it almost has to sit within the context of actually there is a skills offer currently that's working with our young people, or those that are 19 plus. Our Connect to Work offer, which is around supporting individuals with mental health or physical health conditions. That is something that we've decided as a region that we want to focus on, particularly 18 to 24-year-olds within this region as well as the wider kind of work coach offer and the work that exists within various youth hubs as well. So there's a lot of activity. I suppose the challenge for the Trailblazer was really around two things. Firstly, is our offer for our young people good enough? And if not, what else would we want to add and test as part of year one? And secondly, within that, how do we better connect our young people to these opportunities as well? Because connection is really a key. So the Youth Trailblazer offer was very much developed in partnership with our local authority partners. And what we kind of agreed to test as part of the first year activity were three key elements, and there is a fourth element we'll get onto. So in terms of those three key elements is one around how do we better connect our young people with the workplace and with the opportunities that exist. So we did a survey prior to this starting through Transport colleagues, and one of the aspirations that came back from our young people was that they wanted to do retail, which is great and very worthy in its own right, but not necessarily reflective of all of the growth opportunities that exist across our region. So actually, how can we better connect our young people with those opportunities? So one way of doing that would be to utilise subsidised work placements. So and we previously brought the job rotation pilot to colleagues around the table. And it was one of those that it was a real opportunity in terms of how can we test various subsidised employment models or give our opportunity to our local authority partners to do that level of connection as well. The second element that we really wanted to test was actually earlier access for our young residents to our training initiatives. So one of the challenges that our young people often face is around that the combined authorities training and governance very much kicks in at 19 plus. If an individual falls out of college or doesn't make that connection, they can often be trapped on a work coach caseload at a job centre, being unable to be upskilled. So one of the things that we were really keen to test as part of this was actually, could we say to government, if we engage with individuals and offer a training intervention funded through the Trailblazer at 18 rather than 19, can we demonstrate the difference that was going to make? So what we then did is we looked to utilise our Path to Apprenticeship scheme, which is kind of a scheme aimed at supporting earlier interventions for young people to connect them with apprenticeships, as a way of testing out that initiative and demonstrating that to government. And then the third element that we referenced with the paper was around a smoother transition for our residents. Our 18, 21-year-olds, there's a really interesting slide that I'm more than happy to share as part of this. And it was actually within our West Midlands Works document, and it highlights all of the different opportunities that are available for our young people at various points. It's confusing. It's confusing as a practitioner that's worked in employment skills for over 25 years, how I could support somebody to navigate all of those different elements. So there's a real onus on ourselves and our local authority colleagues, and actually all of those organisations that operate within that system, to how we better connect or support our young people to navigate what is a very complex system, with you to then kind of cleaning that up as well. So when we talk about that, and within the paper itself, we've got some examples of what our local authorities have been looking to do. It perhaps is around how we work with VCS organisations and voluntary sector or community organisations to better engage with individuals who might not engage normally because they are sources of trust. But equally, how can we support a more developed approach to tracking and ownership and accountability of that young person's journey as well? And then I suppose finally, the other key elements of funding that we do reference within the paper is around the role of youth coordinators. So within our development of our model, one of the key things we wanted to do is to ensure that each local authority had a a youth coordinator resource. And the intention of the youth coordinator resource was actually in terms of not just around the direct work we might do with residents, but how do we knit together the system to create a more seamless approach? How do we free up that resource, often that might be constrained within local authorities, to actually work in a different way with some of the partners that sit within that ecosystem to make it a more seamless journey? Because I suppose one of the key things for this around the youth trailblazer ultimately is around legacy. So they were some of the key elements that we wanted to test. It's important to note that within this, that a significant amount of this funding has been onward granted to our local authority partners to deliver. So I think that's just around 4.34 million. And that was for them to be able to focus on the subsidised work placement, the smooth transition, and also in terms of having the youth coordinators as well. The element of the 18-year-olds into training is something that we've commissioned as a combined authority directly, because we have existing relationships with those organisations that are currently delivering. In terms of distance moved at this point, so our contract, and this is often the challenge with 1-year projects as they kind of set up, is that our contractual agreement with DWP and DFE was achieved in June this year. So already when we're looking at delivering a piece of work within a 12-month financial window, obviously it shortens some of the timescales. So what we've seen is our local authorities in terms of their activity, much of that activity is commenced September through to October. And obviously there's an appendix within the paper that gives some detail in relation to some of the things that they've looked to focus on, because we've not said to our local authority colleagues you have to do one or the other element. We've basically said we need you to work and understand what works best for your area, rather than us decreeing that it needs to be a certain proportion of one element or a certain proportion of the other element as well. The other thing that I should have noted within this, and apologies if I already have, was in terms of the 5 million and the up to 5 million award, it is not something that we've received the money up front to do. So all of the activity that's done on the Youth Trailblazer is paid in arrears. So it's us demonstrating to government that it's been achieved, that money's been spent, for us to be able to claim that back as well, which appreciating may have impacted on some of those partners that have been able to come on this journey with us to kind of work with us around this space as well. So as I say, the paper is really much in terms of kind of very much setting the scene, showing our approach, the partnership work we've undertaken with our local authorities. And I think the week commencing the 13th of October, we had the opportunity where we officially launched the Youth Trailblazer at this we launched it in Warsaw, and then had a market fair event as well on the Wednesday to kind of bring our local authorities together to kind of showcase what each of them are doing. But I will yield the floor for any questions, Jack.
I've had 3 councillors indicate: Councillor Barker on screen, followed by Councillor McKee, and then Councillor Waters. And I'm happy to add to the list. Councillor Archer.
Thank you, Chair. I always make a plea at this point when you talk about 18 and 19-year-olds for 17-year-olds who get lost in the system. And if they have either worked, stopped working, had an apprenticeship, stopped it, they are really caught because there's no funding for them. So can I just make that plea that it's something I would like government to be pressed on, full stop, to understand 17-year-olds, because despite wanting everyone to go on until they're 18, we know that the facts of life are not that, and we do need to be giving them a bit more support. So 17-year-olds, thank you.
Are we happy to take that as a recommendation that the combined authority lobby for 17-year-olds?
Yeah.
I don't want to lose the point.
Perhaps I would say it's a shared frustration. I think one of the positives around year 2 is there seems to be more of an openness from government in relation to us doing more targeted work at 16 to 17-year-olds as well. And obviously we've alluded to it within our, our work plan, as well as our West Midlands Works plan as well. It is a space that we're very keen to move into.
So we'll have a recommendation that 16 and 17-year-olds you should lobby the government on this, and basically we're supporting you with that. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one of the problems is that anyone employed under 18 needs one-to-one supervision, which is holding back a lot of employment for young people. I think it's overdone, it's unnecessary, it's something historic. I'd be delighted to see a lot more young individuals enter the workforce and the discipline and gain the discipline of going out to work and it being a normal lifestyle for them. But one of the major problems we've got talking about employment under 18 is that many employers, unless they've got one-to-one supervision on the individual, won't employ a young person.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm not necessarily aware of the detail regarding the supervision, whether that's a specific sector piece, but I'm more than happy to take that away to understand that.
Yeah, fine.
Thank you, Councillor McKee.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I've got two questions. First one is on work experience, and I kind of take your hinted point on the retail one, because I remember when John Lewis opened up at the Bullring, I know a lot of people were saying, oh, there's the youth work experience solved, you know, pack everyone into John Lewis. And of course, the internet has such a big effect on it. And I can certainly remember sort of my youth as long ago as it was, you know, I got a job working in retail, and, you know, I personally found that the most boring thing I've ever done in my life. You know, to me, it's, you know, I quite enjoy work, but it's the only time in my life I've arrived and look at my watch within minutes of arriving to try and find out when am I going to go home. You know, if you're busy, it's fine, but when you're not, and you just, you know, to me, it's not, you know, it depends if you're working on a till or something like that. Stacking shelves or doing something, but you know, it's not. But no, my point is about work experiences. Do we set goals with it? Sort of, are we able to get to that nitty gritty? I do hear at the minute that a lot of people who get work experience with big companies are really quite excited because they're going to a big company with a big name. But the feedback you get sometimes is that those who go to smaller companies, sometimes they're working directly with, you know, the employees or the management people, and they can ask other questions outside what they're being asked to do, and it comes away. Where larger companies, you could actually be with loads of other people doing work experience who equally don't know any more than you really, and you come away from it going, I've just done this one task, which is great, but I didn't actually I didn't feel the sort of the essence of the company that I'm working for, and I'd sort of, you know, so I was just wondering, well, how do we monitor this really? Are we getting bang for our buck out of it? Is the question really.
Thank you, Councillor. I think there are two elements for me in relation to this. Firstly, I suppose the work experience we're talking about in relation to the trial base distinctly, I suppose, is around subsidised work experience. And I think subsidised work experience kind of changes the nature of the relationship between the resident and the employer. And I think there is certainly a better, I suppose, a greater expectation from both parties around the kind of the substantial nature of that relationship. I think your wider point is really interesting, because I should have said that this also sits in context of the WARE's wider youth plan and our commitment around the 20,000 work placements as well. And we've been doing a piece of work with the Careers Enterprise Company around a Equilux project that sits in Wolverhampton, working with Wolverhampton Local Authority around how do we ensure that the work experience opportunities that we are developing, that they're having that positive impact on the resident. My work experience, I sat in a corner of an office somewhere, I wasn't spoken to for a considerable period of time, and you then do a task which you may not, you know, you would have hoped, you would have got a little bit more support. So I think the issue is our residents are having a very mixed response to work experience placements. There's a real onus on us in terms of how we drive that level of quality and assurance around what that looks like. And I think that sits there within terms of the subsidised piece, but I think it's where there's a more of a volunteer basis where those individuals aren't being paid that we need to have that level of focus on. But you're right.
Yeah, and just the second bit was on the apprenticeship, and forgive me, I may not totally have my head around this. So if you can give me because I think I've heard in the past, because it's basically how fully utilised is it? I think I've heard in the past about funding being returned, but if we're doing this in arrears, or maybe I've got the wrong understanding of it. But are all the local authorities using the apprenticeship scheme to its maximum, or is there gaps that are not being fully filled?
So the scheme that we're talking about within the Trailblazer is more around a path to apprenticeship. So it's almost a pre-apprenticeship intervention, which is looking at those individuals and making sure that they don't just jump into an apprenticeship, but they have a period of time developing the understanding of what those expectations are should they become an apprentice, hopefully increasing the conversion rate and the retention rate of those apprentices once they're in work. The apprenticeship and local authority colleagues in terms of how they're embracing that opportunity is something that I would have to take away that I don't have the visibility on.
Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to touch on what Councillor Baker said. The 16, 17 to 18-year-olds do need a lot more nurturing and help with it. Now, we in Warsaw, we have got a lot of academies, and the councils do not have really any jurisdiction on what the academies do. They've only got slight say. So this actually causes, I find it actually causes a barrier with communication. And then you've got Walsall College. Now, what needs to be happening is the schools actually linking in with the colleges, and because you actually mentioned there is a bit of a gap with that, because that is the age where they're actually deciding what they want to do. Or, you know, I mean, it's difficult for some children at that age, so young adults, to actually be able to think what they want to do for the rest of their lives. Same as Councillor McKay said, you know, I mean, it's very, very difficult. And when I was at school many moons ago, we had an employment advisor come in and have a nice half an hour to an hour chat with us to discuss what our options was, what we was good at and so forth. And I don't believe they actually do that now. And that would be a big thing if that could be brought back. I know it's in combined authority, but if that could be brought back, it'll actually steer them in the right direction of what they want to do. Thank you.
I agree. I think there is a real importance in the role of careers interventions and those happening at the right time for our residents. I think the careers offer, once again, is so obviously we don't have direct accountability for it. We only have, I suppose, the funding that we draw down through the Careers Enterprise Company to develop our careers hubs, which is around providing the schools with the tools to be able to provide good careers advice in terms of connecting our young residents with the opportunities, and equally how we better connect employers through our Cornerstone Employer Group with those schools as well. And I think you're absolutely right, Councillor. And this the part I was probably trying to get across in relation to what we can be beginning to explore with the youth coordinator role. So whilst the elements of the Youth Trailblazer in terms of the distinct outputs have been focused by government on 18 to 21-year-olds, it's the youth coordinator role that sits within this that then has the flexibility, because there aren't necessarily those outputs attached, to begin to glue the system together to support that level of seamless transition. And I think there's a real onus in relation to how we can get that better relationship between schools and colleges, and certainly something that's currently being discussed and pushed via Department of Education around the testing of potential auto-enrolment, and around the individuals having a placement at the point of, well, every individual in year 11 having a placement at a college. So that's something that we're potentially exploring with DfE.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Archer followed by Councillor Lloyd. Councillor Archer.
Thanks, Chair. And First of all, before I ask the question and make my comments, I'd like to commend you on the work that you and your team are doing. It's such an important area. What I'd like to focus on is the voluntary community organisation part of it, and what you said about being paid in arrears and basically who pays up front. I'd like to, it's all part of the same thing. In my ward, Worsley North, I worked with the King's Trust. They run a programme for young people who have not made the most of their education for all sorts of various reasons. And they run a programme where they help to develop skills. They run projects in the local area. For example, in my ward, they've cleared community spaces. They've repainted children's equipment in parks. They've done a number of things. It gives the young people that are involved real confidence and skills to help get them into employment. But what they had to do, I worked with the Parks Department. I must admit, I didn't even know about a youth coordinator, or I might even be my first stop. So maybe communications could help on that. But they had to raise their own funds for materials, paints, etc. And they had difficulty doing it. They did manage to do it, thankfully. But it occurred to me, listening to you, that they might have been able to tap into these funds to help with their programme, and that could have been probably a big help.
Thank you, Councillor. I think King's Trust, I believe, are one of Birmingham City Council's partners in relation to delivering the Trailblazer across Birmingham. So certainly it's great to see that join up and that level of connection. I think payment in arrears is always something that does present a challenge. We did push back as part of the process to say it potentially would impact on those organisations that are able to be part of this, but I suppose in many respects, it's around being able to fund from those organisations, those staffing that perhaps they were already funding in many respects, but giving them an opportunity to amplify and extend some of the limitations that they may currently have. But it is certainly something that we've noted and are obviously reminding them as part of that discussion process.
So the government is going to finance this in arrears. Is that against achieving targets?
No. Sorry, it just took me a moment to understand the question. So it's about costs. So this is about us demonstrating on a quarterly basis to government the amount of money that has been spent by ourselves and partners, and for us to be able to submit a claim for us to be reimbursed for that funding.
Now, I'm going to be totally radical here. The combined authority has got money sitting in its bank account.
Exactly.
Huge amounts of money sitting in its bank accounts.
Yep.
Now, I don't mind if my local authority has to fund this up a bit front. I don't have a problem with that because we've got cash reserves. But whatever organisation was, I'm sorry, I forgot.
The King's Trust.
The King's Trust. These are charitable organisations are going to struggle. Can we look at whether we can do some advance funding and then we can claim the money back, or trusted partners? I mean, you said the King's Trust were in Birmingham, but apparently now in Dudley as well. Could we have a look at Louise?
That's certainly something we can look at, but clearly there is an element of risk that kind of presents for programmes of this nature. It's also a trial, isn't it, John? So effectively the government trying to learn about how our interventions can help in the region. That's the kind of essence of it, isn't it?
Yes, you're right. Ultimately it's about testing and learning. It's around the government nationally then deciding, based on the additions to the youth guarantee, what it might want to build nationally, and equally enable us to continue to test locally. So in many respects, the legacy of this is around that system join up, which is really important around those local partnerships.
Because we do have discretionary funds, and it's called interest on all this money that we've got sitting in our bank accounts. And I think we've discussed previously what happens to it. I think we're talking, £100,000. We're not, because the whole programme's only 5 million, isn't it? And could we go away and actually have a look and see whether that would actually help? And obviously, you're going to have to talk to our local authority partners, but particularly around these charitable organisations that might need a bit of upfront help. We might not be able to do it, but if we don't ask the question, the answer is always no. Thank you. Yes. Thank you for raising the point. Councillor Lloyd.
Cheers. I'm fully supportive of the Youth Trailblazer, and the works that have gone through it have been phenomenal straight out. However, I do want to just raise a couple of concerns, then I've got a couple of questions. And so, first and foremost, Councillor Barker's recommendation and your recommendation, I'm fully supportive of. I think both of those are very sensible ideas, and they both need to be taken into account going forward. However, I'm very concerned about future funding, and I'm going to use Coventry's Job Shop as an example, but obviously there are many other programmes, charities, partners that are in this loop as well. With the UK SPF ending, and then the local growth fund expected to be mostly capital based, there's going to be a huge gap in revenue funding needed to actually continue any delivery from April next year, let alone anything else. And I was also hoping that we might hear a bit today from the West Midlands Works Plan that was at the Combined Authority Board on the 17th of October. And it's a shame that wasn't a bit more discussed by officers today, because in that it highlights Coventry's Job Shop and obviously others as a model for best in practice. But without those core funding in place, the plan's not going to be deliverable. And then we've got this one on top. So finally, in light of the comments and discussions from the West Midlands Growth Plan and the ongoing recommendation for the Combined Authority to provide some form of breakdown of funding by local authorities, all of this will help demonstrate exactly what I'm saying to be correct in terms of employment support funding and the challenge that it's going to face. It's going to be quite vital for the Combined Authority shows regional and devolved allocations, which I don't think we're fully getting at present on it. And then obviously what the expected outcome from each will be. But then just going into sort of a couple of questions, Chair. And there are a few. Would you just like me to reel them straight or one by one?
One by one is easier for officers.
Fantastic. Cheers, Chair. And so how does that Youth Trailblazer actually align with the Mayor's Jobs for Everyone mission and the broader Combined Authority employment plan? Because as I've already highlighted, without those core bits of funding, it all falls down straight away. So I'm sort of really concerned about that, of how that stacks up, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. So I would say in relation to the Trailblazer, I completely take on board the comment that was made earlier around the importance of the Coventry Job Shop. If we look at the model that we've utilised around the Youth Trailblazer, around Connect to Work, it's been almost embracing, as we say within the West Midlands Works paper, around having these hubs of which we can layer this support to basically build almost a one-stop shop for this offer. And I believe conversations are continuing outside of this meeting in relation to what those options and what those opportunities are. I think sometimes what happens in relation to the Youth Trailblazer, in particular in relation to this, is that we get issued by the government, or we get the opportunity via the government to look at various one-year funding models, for which what we are then trying to do is seeing how we can take that funding to embrace and build an ecosystem that then works for our residents. And the one-stop shop approach, from my perspective, is certainly a way of, when I talked earlier around the complexity of the system, certainly makes it easier for our young people, our vulnerable young people, to be able to navigate. So I think this is one of many building blocks that put together kind of create that, but there is always, because of the short-term nature of the funding, it's a building block, but one that we need to be aware that the importance of the role of it influencing national government as much as doing anything else, because we're going to get some really excellent outputs from it, but ultimately after 12 months and now after 2 years, because we're expecting that second year extension, it's one where, as with UKSPF, as with ESF before it, and as with Trailblazer, it's short-term pots of funding looking to achieve certain things that we're then trying to ensure that regionally we can align to create something that works for our residents.
Councillor Lloyd, did you have a further point?
Cheers, Chair. I've got two more, if I may, Chair. So how's the programme going to help address mental health challenges and barriers that have been identified already within the Youth Voice survey?
So I would say in relation to the key challenges that we're currently faced within delivery, I suppose firstly we're still very much within our early stages of activity. As I say, based on the fact that the contracts were signed in June, and then obviously our local authority partners, in terms of being able to receive the funding, also have to go through their governance arrangements as well, which has meant a lot of that activity is has commenced between September and October. So we're at a very early stage in relation to the physical delivery of the activity. I would say that one of the key challenges that we've probably had from a government perspective is that the level of scrutiny in terms of the level of our customer information that's being required to be returned to both DWP and DFE has actually been higher than some of our other contracts for which we get significantly more funding. And in many respects, some of our residents are being slightly reticent in terms of signing up for something because of that level of data exchange. So it's something that we are working with DWP and DFE nationally to understand a better way of helping our residents to engage and not have something like that inhibit their want to kind of join us on this journey.
Cheers, Chair. And my final one, if I may, and how will the Signed Authority track the outcomes to ensure value for money? And also, what measurable outcomes are we going to demonstrate success in reducing the NEET rates across the region?
So I'd say just in terms of the outputs and outcomes, as part of our return process, our local authorities provide us with returns on a monthly basis for us to be able to understand the impact that's had in their area, both in terms of numerically and in terms of a narrative as well, to help us understand the wider impact as well. So I think that's kind of equally then we then have to provide that report combined from our 7 local authorities back to DWP on a monthly basis, and also provide a quarterly return as well. So as you can imagine, there is a good deal of insight being gained from those level of returns. In terms of the impact on NEET, I suppose this is one of the frustrations, but one of the challenges in relation to contracts of this nature. So when we looked to take the allocations, it was based on, I think, around 16,000 young people across our region who were claiming universal credit. If you look at the number in relation to those individuals who this will be able to support, it's just over 1,000. So in many respects, this is why this has to be treated as a test and learn piece for us to understand how the system works and how these interventions work. And also there is a wider evaluation that is being commissioned to kind of, I suppose, hold us into account to make sure that we're really capturing that level of learning as well.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd, you still have your hand up. Did you have a final question?
It's just a very short comment, possibly, Chair, if I may. Just obviously, thank you for the answers. Appreciate all of that. I've ticked off the ones that I can further probe on, and which I'll do outside this forum. But I do want to very quickly just revisit my start point, just in terms of funding cuts, etc., already in place across the partner agencies and the charitable side. Really want to revisit Councillor Burroughs' suggestion about the combined authority pot possibly standing in to try and give a hand, because it is uncertain times for everybody at present, but actually being able to give our colleagues and friends from employment world just a boost up it's a no-brainer. It has to be done. So obviously I don't think I can ask for a revisit on decisions that have already been made, but what I can ask for is a revisit on those decisions and how this is actually going to affect the Trailblazer plan going forward. Because I know for Coventry, as example, as I've said, it's going to be nigh on impossible for us to be able to deliver the outcome, knowing that April fund gap is massively missing. We're just not going to have the manpower personnel to be able to do what's asked. It's as simple as that, Chair. So Whether there's a recommendation in that or me just having a moan, take your pick.
Louise, do you have a comment or?
No, it's really, really helpful feedback, but in the sense that looking ahead in the multi-year integrated settlement that we're expecting and information is starting to drip through now, it's an important point that the combined authority want to support the local authorities to deliver. And this is a good example of how we could do that. But it just needs a bit more thought, I think.
Are you saying that this kind of money would be in the integrated settlement?
No, but I think in essence, what we'll be able to do with the integrated settlement is think much further ahead, because the problem that John's talked about is the short-term nature of funding awards like this one, the Youth Trailblazer of 5 million, but it gives us that certainty into the future, and it helps with our medium-term, excuse me, our medium-term financial planning.
You know, it's such a small amount in many ways. We're thinking about it, and when we were talking to the mayor a couple of weeks ago, where small projects will be in the integrated settlement, surely that's the way forward.
Absolutely agree that we can't look at things in a piecemeal way anymore, because it leads to difficulties of this nature. Yeah, but as the information drips through, there'll be more to come on the multi-year integrated settlement.
I think what you're actually saying is we need more clarity on what the integrated settlement actually will cover. Thank you.
Councillor Quinn.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, my question has been covered by Councillor Lloyd regarding the improving outcomes of the Youth Trailblazer program. And I note that you are at an early stage of this program. However, while you are starting, I'm already thinking ahead about what you have in place to ensure the consistency in delivery across the region. Have you thought about that in your planning, in order to be able to pick up on issues and make improvements as you go forward? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's a really important point, particularly around, even given the short-term nature of this, around the role of corrective action in terms of us understanding where they're not working and address them and do them in a slightly different way. I think I'd go back and say it's been really important that we've been able to provide our local authority colleagues with the freedom to choose in relation to which of these elements that they wanted to take forward, and actually not even necessarily giving them the freedom to actually look to flex models as well. So particularly around subsidised employment, it's around then providing or identifying the right cohort that they wanted to focus on, about them providing the right number of weeks, the right level of intervention, something that they would know would work for their system. So it's ensuring we've got those flexibilities within that test and learn, but also being able to hold in the nicest possible way partners to account in terms of understanding that it's doing what we expected it to do and making that difference. And each of our local authority colleagues within this were all committed to outputs and outcomes that they're sharing with us on a monthly basis in terms of what the distance moved as part of this as well. So it's one in terms of making sure that there's the right rigour, but equally having the rigour within a test and learn environment to make sure that people have the freedom to be able to see what works best in terms of that local ecosystem as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walters.
Thank you, Chair. Now, mine's not a question, it's an observation. Now, I work for a local housing association and I worked in the employment training team, and there was batches of funding that they could actually claim for getting people back into work and everything like that. But the problem was, the issue was, it was only like 16 weeks that funding was allowed for. So after that, there was completely dropped, and there needs to be some stability and longer term funding so as they can actually nurture nature into what they need to be doing, because that just doesn't work. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. News Grid, and I suppose the good news from this is that the government's commitment to extend the Youth Trailblazer to a second year. So we're not having that point this year in relation to those individuals who need to complete within a set period of time. So that within the delivery model for Trailblazer, there isn't necessarily saying you can only have 10 weeks or 16 weeks, so individuals can stay for the length of the Trailblazer funding to be supported. And I think that's really important. But taking on board other councillors' comments in relation to this, it's one around a requirement probably for a wider independent support solution moving forward to get that level of sustainability.
Thank you. I attended, I think I was the only councillor in the region that attended the 15th of October marketplace downstairs. The most valuable thing of that was that my team in Solihull appreciated it, because I talked to them about what they were doing. You might want to go back and have conversations with your own employment support teams. That can be done informally, which is what I did, or can be done through your scrutiny committees by asking them in to explain actually how they're going to do some of the questions that we've been asking, which is how does this fit with that? How are we going to cope with the fact that the funding appears to run out in April, but might actually go on beyond April? And just kind of nudge and encourage as we can do as councillors. So that would be my suggestion coming out of this. And I think we have a recommendation that the combined authority looks at some bridging funding between doing the work and receiving the cash for the voluntary organisations, trusted voluntary organisations that are going to help within individual local authorities. I think that's what's come out of this, hasn't it? Thank you, councillors.
Yep.
And we move on to.
I did ask to speak a while ago.
Sorry.
Forgive me, Mr. Chairman. Could you explain, please, some of the outcomes on the tables? Because being from Dudley, I'm looking at some of the numbers, and the numbers are relatively low. And on page 38, we start with the intervention of 20.
Yes. So in terms of and then I suppose it would be helpful in relation to always having a key in relation to what intervention 1 and intervention 2 relates to. So the intervention 1 relates to subsidised employment. The intervention 3 relates to the transition piece. So they are all in terms of numbers of individuals engaged in terms of the output. In terms of the number being so low for Dudley, so I suppose I say so low for Dudley, it is obviously within the table you've seen the allocations between the local authorities, so that there's a variation in each of the local authorities funding, which was based on the number of 18 to 21-year-olds who were claiming universal credit at the point of us commencing this piece of activity. One of the reasons that the numbers for intervention 1 are lower than intervention 3 is because of the nature of the subsidised employment. So we've seen from the job rotation pilot as an example that it was 875,000 to support kind of 50 to 75 people. So it's actually a more expensive model in relation to subsidised employment. So it's really important that it's identified for the right residents, that it's going to make a real difference in relation to what they're going to do.
Okay, but a second point, if there's 4.34 million and there's 312 at the bottom of the table, which equates to 13 or 14,000 pounds per placement.
Me to there's over 1,000 1,300 residents that would be supported.
There's 13 or more.
It's the numbers equate to different elements of the interventions. It's 1,300 overall that would be supported.
Okay, so those figures are obviously out, aren't they? Okay, go on to page 49 then, please. Once again, we look at, if you go to the bottom of the page and the value added, Dudley's 20 comes through at 5,000 a piece.
Yeah.
And yet, and also Wolverhampton does well, comes in at nearly 7,000 a piece. Can you explain the variation in numbers?
It's so in terms of, as I suppose I would refer to it in terms of the unit. Do you thinking in terms of why the values are different for each of the local authorities in relation to, sorry, the values are different in each of the local authorities in relation to the amount it costs per learner, per resident?
I'm struggling with this. If I'm think fair enough, but I'm struggling with this one. So you're saying that these are the values that local authorities are putting on it, not the proper outcomes.
So in terms of the table itself, it's each of the local authorities, as I say, have been able to determine which of the interventions that they want to be able to utilise. And within those interventions themselves, they've been able to identify the number of residents that they wanted to be able to support. We haven't necessarily decreed a particular unit cost. We haven't said so for a subsidised employment piece of activity. We haven't said that must be £8,000 per person. We've given the local authorities the freedom to be able to determine the best model that works for those. So actually, in relation to a Wolverhampton intervention of work experience, that could be because there are more weeks within that work experience that are being subsidised. It could be that there's different added interventions that are put within that.
So it isn't value for money. VFM isn't value for money.
It is value for money in relation to.
That's as clear as mud to me. I'm sorry. Okay, thank you. Hang on. What am I? Yeah, the small number, 400. Difference in value. Another point is, you've just mentioned that they're on universal credit. Is that the way we find them?
No, Councillor. So it's the way in which we were able to work out or to take the local authority allocations was based on the data that we understood that there were, as I say, 16,000 18 to 21-year-olds who were in receipt of universal credit. In terms of how the Trailblazer works, there are two elements. There's one in relation to, as I said, about the guarantee before. But the important part around that is not just engaging with Job Centre Plus. Job Centre Plus are important partners in relation to be able to refer individuals to the Trailblazer. But actually, as we mentioned before around the transition piece, it's the role of BCS organisations who are able to engage with residents who may not be engaging with provision already. When I say provision, not engaging with Job Centre Plus, are actually a really important group for us when we look at the level of inactivity that exists within the region, particularly of young people as well. So it's around actually having Job Centre Plus referring to this, but actually having the Trailblazer engage within our community to engage with residents in a different way. And that's why connection is really important.
It's an enormous problem. The needs across the board, across the piece is enormous now, isn't it?
Yeah, youth unemployment continues to be a challenge. If we look at our wider youth unemployment around 18 to 24-year-olds, we've got five local authorities that are in above the 10% of the 10% in terms of youth unemployment in terms of the claimant count or UC, against a national average around between 5 and 6%. So it's a particular challenge for this region, and it's one of those where we wish that there was more to be able to have a wider impact in terms of the numbers, but it's really important we have this kind of
I think that also you have to look at the knock-on effects that people who aren't helped at an earlier stage become ingrained within a system. And then what have you got? I think if you've got 26% in the area economically inactive, it's massive. And really, it can't go on the way we're going, can it? You know?
If we want to achieve the ambitions that set out in terms of our West Midlands work plans or in terms of national government around 80% employment rate, unless we address the level of inactivity, I think in relation to where do we sit? I think we're at 70% employment rate. I think it's just moved up from 69 to about 71%. 5% of our region are unemployed. So actually, in terms of how we move that dial to achieve that, the only way we can do it is through working with those individuals who are particularly not working due to health conditions or not working for caring reasons. Equally, all of those individuals that we need to have good conversations with around how we better connect them with employment opportunities.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think we need to move on now to the performance monitoring, which is page 7. Who's helping us with that? Hello.
Hi, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So the report in front of you provides an overview of Q2 performance for the annual business plan. So it focuses on assurance that delivery remains on track and that our monitoring and escalation processes continue to operate effectively. So performance for Q2 is strong. Out of 148 indicators, only 6 were rated red and amber at this stage. Obviously, as we go through the year, because information is calculated cumulatively, you may expect more reds and ambers in Q3 and Q4 accordingly. So regarding the 6 reds and ambers, they are mainly down to timing delays rather than any specific delivery risks, and all are expected to recover by the end of the year, this financial year. Compared to the same time last year, there were 14 red and ambers. So obviously this represents a clear improvement and reflects the continuing embedded of performance culture across the organisation. Just so you're aware, performance is tracked through Power BI dashboards, which we use. This looks at data from across all directorates across the organisation. Capital spend is already incorporated into these dashboards, and from Q3 onwards, we'll start incorporating risk information. So we'll provide a more holistic view of performance. So you can see performance, the financial information attributed to it, but then also if there's any overriding risks associated with that individual, project or program, for example. So it will provide a holistic view of performance from Q3 onwards. So we'll continue to do that. And just to state, the 6 red and ambers have mitigations in place. You've got Appendix 2 to kind of state what those mitigations are. And there's no material delivery concerns at this stage. Obviously, that could potentially change as the year progresses, but at this current state, there's no material risk. And finally, this is the 5th report to Overview and Scrutiny Committee on the annual business plan. And the next update will be in Q3 of February 2026. And this will also be the final annual business planning report that we'll provide before we transition to the rolling annual corporate plan, which will provide a more joint-up approach and forward-looking approach, I guess, to planning and performance across the organisation. And it will also align, and I know Louise kind of alluded to this, to the comprehensive spending review. So that cycle will be more aligned to that. So it will enable us to kind of plan better on a yearly basis. So in summary, the performance this quarter shows strong momentum, effective oversight, and we've got clear recovery plans in place based off what you can see in Appendix 2, which leaves us in a good position to deliver on our commitments for the year end. That's it, Chair. Is there any questions?
Councillor McKay.
Yeah, thanks so much for the report. It's really clear. Thanks. Just my questions about if I've got this right, the Unit 4 procurement system that is being installed. It was referred to there. I just, when I read the commentary next to it, it was scary because, I represent Birmingham City Council and maybe where that's had its IT issues over a system implemented problem. And, I've read those words, which obviously I take it to be totally truthful, but obviously at BCC, I've read those exact same words, and 150 million pounds later, we're still waiting for a full implementation of the system. So I thought it would be lax of me not to ask about how we're doing with the implementation of that system.
So just so in terms of my role, I provide performance reporting and I'll provide that assurance around the reporting itself. Regarding individual projects or programs, as you can imagine, there's hundreds across the CA. I wouldn't be the SME on that, but what I can tell you in relation to this is that anything coming to scrutiny committee, I have conversations with the actual SMEs in relation to the actual commentary being provided to make sure that we can review the information accordingly. So we've got that additional level of assurance around certainty in terms of what's been provided. In addition to that, obviously, this is reviewed also by senior leaders, the information within the report itself, just to make sure that there are no material concerns in what's actually being put forward. So hopefully that provides a level of assurance in terms of the checks and balances that we go through in terms of the commentary itself. And I know Louise will probably be able to add a bit more in relation to that.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Jessica. Thank you. I'm the senior responsible owner for this system. So this is part of our wider enterprise resource planning system. And about a year ago, we estimated that we would be able to implement the contract management, supplier relationship management parts of the new system by the end of September. And unfortunately, that wasn't possible due to the original solution not being kind of what we were expecting from how it would work for the procurement team. So we're on track to deliver within this financial year, but it will be later than we originally said. So it's not a major concern, and our Chief Finance Officer is comfortable with the commentary that's been provided in this report. She's actually signed it off, hasn't she, Jessica? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, obviously, Birmingham's got signed off as well, and we've got told the same words. So, yeah, to a degree, I think the clue was in your answer, in the sense that Olca wasn't delivering reports, and you could see that if you're on the right scrutiny committee, there was no finance report because it wasn't being delivered, even though we were told everything was fine. If you were looking, it wasn't. So if you're telling me you're still able to get your reports, then I'm slightly more reassured than before. So yeah, thank you.
Just to add also, these reports go to an internal panel. So if any of the reds and ambers require escalating also to say exec board, that's done accordingly. So if a decision can't be made, or if there's an issue that may potentially need further oversight, that check and balance is also there in relation to the report. So I think the key is with it, there's visibility of that actual information. And just to add, the actual holistic approach around providing performance and financial information together provides that additional check and balance where you can see, okay, regarding this particular, say, project or program, this is the actual overall underspend, particularly if it was a capital-based project.
I'm going to follow up on this one because this was on my list as well. IT projects which are red are always very worrying. Are we saying that this in the next report should be an orange? Is that what the target is? Because then we will have clear expectation it will be done within the financial year.
Now that is a very good question. In terms of it'll be Q3, the next update, won't it, in December? So we'll still be behind the original schedule, but it will be less behind.
Sorry, Chair. What we could do for the next report, though, which is available in quarter 3, obviously this has been raised as a potential question issue. I'll be able to provide an update on that, because by year end it should have been completed based on targets, etc. So we'll be able to provide an update on that actual performance itself.
And by the end of quarter 3, we'll know whether we're going to hit the year end or not. I mean, I've seen quite a few IT projects, and if you're going to complete them in 3 months, you know you're going to complete them in 3 months.
True.
So we will know, won't we?
Yeah.
Right. And I think if we can have that report at the next one, I think that might actually help with an assurance on our part, because I hear the words, but I've seen quite a few projects run behind.
Yeah. I mean, we were quite roundly mocked when we asked questions about it, and then when you go to follow it, you find out all the officers have resigned. You know what I mean? So, it's not that. And to be fair, I mean, I don't want to go into that. It's more to do with what we've got here, and I hear what you're saying. And yeah, it's just that's what scrutiny's for, isn't it? To make sure everything stays on track.
Councillor Bateman.
Yeah. I'm going to wish I hadn't asked this, but I'm going to anyway. When I looked at this, I felt it didn't contain really much information for us into looking at the question 2 performance and the reds and the yellow and the ambers. And it's certainly different from what I'm used to seeing in our audit and risk at Wolverhampton. So I looked for a little bit of advice, and I went to the QI, the intelligence, and just asked them the question about how did they see this. And it tells me the ASH plan cannot begin until the SAHP is finalised. The weakness there creates a dependency bottleneck. Any slippage in the SHAP development directly delays the ASH plan. And I thought, well, that sounds quite important. And I wondered if you could just address that as I go on to just ask the other issue. Risks are labelled as low or minimal without quantitative evidence or mitigating details. The weakness lacks measurable indicators and schedule slippage tolerance, financial exposures, making accountability and scrutiny difficult. I agree with that, because it doesn't have any of the information that I have at Wolverhampton, which helps us to understand how important the amber is to us. And I've left the red alone. And it goes on. And I ain't going to go on any further, but to say, Chair, I don't think this contains enough information for me to make any realistic objectives, bearing in mind, where we are at the time and the meeting and the like. And I just wondered whether or not, and if I see Claire's the chief officer, go back and tell her that Phil Bateman's asked some questions in relation to this, because it's not what we would get in Wolverhampton in relation to an explanation. And I'm on scrutiny board, and the reason we're on scrutiny board is to make sure we don't go down the same steps that you've indicated. And forgive me for saying that, because we don't want to go down that path. And my role here is important, and I want to deal with it in the best way possible. I think this is a weakness for us, because it doesn't give us the information that we can ask the proper questions on. Thank you.
Could I just ask, in terms of the mitigation, do you want more detail around that actual indicator, more information? What specifically would you like?
Well, as intelligence tells me, there is not enough information there for us. Look, I might just as well look at that and say implementation, the affordability and proposed regional targets, work is currently focused, blah, 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 blah. It doesn't tell you anything about it. It doesn't, unless, of course, myself and my helper are so unintelligent we can't follow it. I mean, I just don't think there's enough there to help us go forward and to take an objective view on the amber, bearing in mind how crucial it seems to be in relation to the question I asked about the ASH program and the SHAP.
Sorry, Chair. I was just going to add, in terms of if you do want potentially more detailed information around the specific indicators, it may be worthwhile. I know this was discussed previously, Chair, that the individuals associated with those specific programs, projects that have kind of detailed some of that commentary will be a part of, I know Lindsay discussed this before, part of any future work programme that could be looked at in conjunction with this. So if you do have commentary there which you think's not sufficient, it could be that you have those conversations with some of the SMEs in relation to that to get some of that detail potentially, further detail that you want from the individual project to provide further assurance, if that helps.
I mean, I'm in two minds on this because where I am is we've been told this is going to hit the year end. If it doesn't hit, if it doesn't hit the year end, I doubt the whole system. So I'm willing to give this a go and see whether it works. I do kind of understand what Councillor Bateman is saying, but as there are commitments in here, where I am is I'm happy to let this run. I mean, this is the first time I've actually read this really in detail, to a certain extent, because the agenda looked a little shorter and I spent a bit more time. But I don't know how others feel. And part of the purpose of us asking questions is to flesh out what is in here. I guess our trouble is we haven't necessarily got the right officers here to do that fleshing out. Because while on the IT ones we have, on the housing ones we haven't, because Rob has gone. So, Councillor McKay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think at the end of the day, if we've got a question out of the report, I'm quite happy for someone to get back to us after the meeting to say, okay, I can't give you an answer, but I'll get the officer responsible for that to give the whole committee an email within whatever days and say there's your answer. Because the alternative, Birmingham City Council cabinet report, 2,000 pages that was at the last one, 2001 I think it was the last cabinet. That comes out 7 working days beforehand. Those of us who are opposition sitting there in the cabinet, we don't have officer support to go through that. So you've got to sit there and read 2,000 pages because you don't find, it's not in the covering note what you're looking for, is it? The things they hide in that in Appendix 3, in the end of where the font's 8, and so, and so the last thing I want is to come here to a meeting to suddenly find out I've got these reports that are the right thing. Doesn't mean basically we look at something, you get the feel of something, we ask you a question, you either give us an answer or another officer gives us an email and then we'll follow it up. I don't think it's like for us really to go through a library with the stuff to try, because we're not experts in all these fields, are we? That's what we're asking you the questions for,
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, just one comment, Chair, is around what the role of the CA's audit and risk committees on some of these as well, because I assume it's being picked up through there as well, particularly on IT, and some of those really big projects, they must be going through audit as well as ourselves. So it might be that it would actually be helpful for us to have an update from the audit committee around sort of what assurance they've got. Perhaps that would help alleviate sort of confused.
We do actually have the chairman of the audit committee here, because I was going to specifically ask that question. Have you got plan number 87 on your agenda? Because that is about risk management and the process for that. But maybe you can answer a more general comment before coming back to the specific point 87 of these, which is an orange, of these 6 items. Thank you.
So I think it's a very interesting debate, really, and in my experience, these reports come in all kinds of shapes and formats with different information. I might need a little bit of help from Louise since I'm so new in role, but from a risk and audit committee point of view, I'll be very happy to have a good look at it.
Thanks, Cecilia. Yeah, Absolutely. The work programme for the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee does include attention to risk management. I think it's quarterly. I think it's
Yeah,
definitely,
it is, yeah.
yeah. So it's definitely on the agenda for the Audit Risk and Assurance Committee. And just to reassure members as well, around the IT system that we talked about earlier, the Unit 4 system, this is the new module of an already existing system that we've been using successfully for many, many years. So this is in response to the Procurement Act 2023. We identified that we weren't managing contracts as effectively as we could be. So we're upgrading the contract management software. So it's not the whole system, it's just a small part of it to enhance the system that we've already got. If that makes sense.
Thank you.
I think that was everything that was missing.
Yeah.
Can I say I'm pleased I asked the question. Really, make no mistake about it, because you know the issues here. It's a long way to come to say nothing and not to ask the right question. And these are the right questions, and they're the ones that's got the least information about them. I mean, it could get worse if I was to go through what they tell me. It could, but I'll respond in writing to that issue around procurement and strategy and delay, because it tells me that yeah, okay. But I don't shy away from asking that question, even if it makes me look maybe a little less intelligent than some of the other members around the table.
No, thanks.
I'm really keen on ensuring that I go back and I don't get caught at a later date with the question, well, why didn't you ask that if you felt concerned about it? So I've asked it, and I'm happy now.
Can I just ask something, the officer, Mr. Chairman? When you've got things are flagged up in the red or things are going wrong, do you have a mass system where you get together and try and sort it out?
Sorry, what system?
A mass system where those people involved come together and put the cards on the table of what is the problem.
So in terms of assurance, if something's going red or amber, the information is reported to a panel that has a number of senior officers there, heads of service. I know Louise chairs that panel, so we can have oversight of that information.
And how often if you call that panel together, how often does that panel meet?
That panel meets on a monthly basis.
Once a month. So like a mass system gets together to look at the problems.
So in terms of reds and ambers, because there's a number of actual indicators, so you wouldn't look at absolutely everything because it'd be too detailed. But we focus on those reds and ambers and potentially any greens that could become a concern in the actual meetings, so that we can look at the actual mitigation and make sure we're happy with where it's going, or whether it requires further actual actions or oversight in terms of the information being provided, and whether it needs to be acted upon or escalated accordingly.
Are there any further questions? I mean, I'm reasonably comfortable because I can see what the deadlines are. And the one that really worried me was the affordable housing one, because it's the least clear. And I think that involves external agencies, doesn't it? I mean, that's the problem. We're coordinating with Homes for England or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've seen Rob Lamont sort out the previous bottleneck, and I suspect he'll sort this one out. It's kind of, and if he doesn't, then we'll have to come back to it. But most of the rest of it is the project's been delayed by 3 months, therefore it's failed. But the situation is still being managed at the moment. It wasn't in crisis before, and therefore we just need to make sure that come the end of the year these are all done. And if they're not, then we ask questions. Hang on, you told us 6 months ago they were going to be done, and they're not. And I'm sure they will be, won't they? Okay, any further questions on that? We have work programme next. Anything on the work programme?
Nothing to add from myself, Chair.
Well, thank you, members. And thank you those on screen. And we've made a series of recommendations which will come out in the minutes. Yes. Thank you, everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Chair.